You know, when I go out there lecturing, I often start, especially when I'm doing stuff around the history of astrology, by saying to people, where did astrology begin? When did astrology actually start? And the way I worked it out for simplistic reasons is that it started when some hominid in an East African valley got off its knuckles and stood up straight for the first time, giving it a different visual perspective, and in the evening would have looked up and have gone, wow, what's that, in various forms of some type of communication with itself. And over coming months and years and decades, that hominid would have noticed that certain lights were moving against the backdrop of the stars. They wouldn't have been able to comprehend this. They would have just seen it as moving lights and not known what to do. But over the millennia, I guess that legends and myth started developing amongst these bipedal sort of first proto-humans, proto-Neanderthal. And since that time, humanity has looked to the skies and to the heavens not only for meaning and understanding, but also, I think, for inspiration and hope. Sometimes you see people walking down the street and their forehead is attached to the front of their boots, and other times they walk down the street and they're whistling. I tend to look up as much as I can rather than down, or at least on the horizon. However, the nature of astrology is fickle. It is not something that is a science. It is not predictable. Often predictions don't work, as many of you who know my stuff know. I only get it right. I've got an edge. Because of my long-term understanding and pattern recognition skills that I've developed over 35 years, I can see patterns, and thus I've got an edge when it comes to forecasting, not predicting. But it's something that anyone can learn over a long period of time. It's playing the odds. But astrology is fickle, and even in the best of circumstances, only 75 to 80% of forecasts come true, and even then in different ways. It's an alive motive force, constantly changing. Without humanity, the patterns in the skies would still be happening. And perhaps some other species would recognize them. And perhaps that species would also draw metaphor and analogy from those patterns and make myth and legend and use them to evolve. But without humanity, of course, there's no astrology. There's just astronomy. And of course, astronomy is the study of the movements of the planets and stars in the heavens. And astrology is the study of the effects of those movements. I'd love to address a scientific meeting with this, because I've got the stats to prove I'm right, to an extent anyway. Astrology in the 21st century is changing fast now. We're entering a phase, as symbolised of course by Uranus in Aries and Pluto in Capricorn and the ongoing square. We're entering a phase now where it's almost like humanity is being forced into some type of massive, immediate consciousness upgrade. And it's just a question of whether we're going with it willingly or kicking and screaming. And using the big picture, using the large scale long-term astrological overview as a kind of big pattern for this. As I often say again in my lectures, the concentrated period of this time, which has been escalating since the late 1920s, early 1930s, the concentrated period of this time is perhaps 1998-9 through to 2016-17. And by the time that Pluto's into the end of Capricorn, come 2022, 2023, it seems that patterns are then set for the long term. So it's an amazing time to be alive, and if you've got any sense and you want to bring your kids up in a way that's going to guarantee them a future, don't put them into banking or politics. Get them into plumbing or electricity or carpentry with astrology as a hobby, something they can do when they're older. Astrology, love it or hate it, it's always been there. It's outlived every religion, every theology, every political system, every culture. It's always there. And as long as there's humans to look at the stars and go, wow, look at that pattern, astrology will survive. So until then, catch you later. Bye.